this, more than probably anything in my entire career, we all get, because we're all living this at some level. And so if ever there's been something where I think admissions officers are going to read applications and look to something with understanding, across a whole host of issues, this is a time.
I would agree. There's a Q&A function in this webinar that we'd like you to use. Leanna is in our control booth and we'll be reading your questions, and we'll get to those in a little bit. But Crystal, perhaps you could share the kinds of questions that you're hearing that coming from families, and maybe are there certain questions that we could address here that would help to alleviate some of those concerns? Is there anything that comes to mind?
That's a hard question. I think that as families and as students are getting used to the idea of being at home, it depends on where you are in high school. I think for the seniors, talking about their senior year looks dramatically differently, which Bob and Rick talked a little bit about, and talked about how there's so much out of their control and their world is just shifting, and they're just having to rebound, whether they have gone, their grades have gone past fail, or whether they still are getting grades. The issue is, like, no one knows what those grades means. If they should sit for AP exams, what those scores mean. And we understand that those challenges and those tests look dramatically differently than they have in the past. What this summer is going to look like, and students are excited about sports camps, and they're excited about internships and jobs and things that they had already planned, and what if they can't do those things? And the answer is, we get it. All across the country, in the world, we understand that you can only do so much, and we're all sitting in our living rooms in our homes together. And so we are very understanding that the application is going to look different for next year. And I think that's the piece that I would want families and students to come out of this with, is that we're just really understanding of the situation that they're in, and we're very empathetic of where students are and the experiences that they're having right now.
I'm really glad that students have the chance to hear that directly from each of you. What about, just sort of off the top of your head, some advice, like some suggestions? What are some things that students can do during this very unique time that would give them a sense of purpose and help them feel like they're making positive progress towards their goals? Any ideas, Bob?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I'll tell you a little bit of a story that I hope illustrates this somewhat. So when I was in college, I was working with a faculty member, and we were doing a meditation workshop for students. And the idea was to kind of create sort of an opportunity for students, especially at a very stressful time, to kind of take a step back, to take a pause, and to sort of reconnect with something that helped them to really be their best selves. And so in this workshop, one of the exercises that the faculty member did was around food, and it was this kind of food meditation. And I have to confess, I love junk food, and especially junk snack food. And so one of my favorite junk snack foods is Doritos. So we happened to have, because it was an event at a residence hall on campus, and you always have to have food for events at residence halls on campus. So we had Doritos. And so with this food meditation, the idea was to take a piece of food and to eat it very, very slowly, because then you could really sort of take in all of the flavors and all of the experience of eating that particular piece of food. So it turns out that if you take a Dorito and you eat it really, really slowly, it tastes terrible. It is not good food. It is like, Doritos are meant to be.
Meant to be.
Yes, like you just shovel them in, because that is how you should eat a Dorito. And so I was thinking a little bit about that, and you know, maybe if you were to eat a, you know, a really fresh raspberry or something like that, you would have a much different experience. So, you know, when I think about kind of the life that students are living right now, so much of what we do, we're so we're excited and we're geared up and we're so scheduled. We have so many different things that we're doing, and we're moving at such a fast pace that we don't have that chance to really kind of take a step back and think about the moments that we're creating from sort of piece to piece. And I'm not suggesting that the life that you created thus far is like some nasty Dorito that if you eat it really slowly, you're not going to be as excited about it. But to really kind of take a step back and think about within each moment, where do you find something that makes you excited or makes you happy? I also think about like the billboards in Fahrenheit 451. If you're going down the road at some breakneck speed, they make sense to you. But when you're actually moving at a slower pace, maybe they don't make quite as much sense, or maybe you notice something else along the side of the road that you wouldn't have seen before. If you're a musician, you know, they call it woodshedding, right? Like you have a chance to take a step back and go back behind the woodshed and work on something that maybe you didn't have time to work on before because you were busy doing so many other things. So we know, again, like we know how hard this is, and sometimes just getting through the day, not strangling another person in your house, that is success, right? But can you find some time? Can you find some space to be able to connect with something that maybe you just didn't have time to do before because you were so busy with so many other things?
I like that, on the other side of this, to be able to say, but at least I got to do that for myself. Yeah. Rick, thoughts?
Yeah, I think too often students are tempted to think about this and think, oh, gee, you know, what can I do that's going to really help me on the college application? And, you know, maybe if you are super involved in theater, you might think, aha, I can write and act and direct my own one-person show, and I'm going to put that on my college application for the spring of 2020, and everybody's going to be dazzled. No, we're not. We know you did it for your family. We know they all applauded because you were amazing. If you're, I think Crystal mentioned, you know, sports. If you're a track athlete, you can go out and you can compete in your backyard. You better be in first place if you're going to do that in your backyard, since you're the only competitor. And I think, you know, I think Bob has it exactly right. This is a time when colleges aren't going to expect kind of that you're moving forward with your extracurricular activities. We're not going to look at this as a time and say, well, you know, what did they do? And so it's an amazing gift that most high school students, you know, that are in the kind of academic program that our students are usually in, they don't have this gift to really take a step back and say, you know, how do I spend my time? And I think spending the time in a way that's constructive is important. You don't want to, you know, get up and lay around until noon every day, and then, you know, you're still in your pajamas at 4. You need some purpose, and yes, school is going to be some of that purpose for many students right now. But whether it's projects around the house, or if you love to read, you know, and you don't have time to read for pleasure these days. If you've always wanted to, you know, learn how to do some computer programming, learn how to do computer programming. But do it through the lens of, you know, what's going to be good for me, what's going to enrich my life, what's going to help me maintain my sanity during this time, and don't think about what it is that colleges are going to be thinking. The kind of flip side of this that I would say for students is, you know, focusing on the academic work that you have is actually pretty important right now. You know, colleges care about your courses and they care about your grades typically because they think it means something in terms of your preparation. And that preparation, you know, is important. If you're finishing out the year, maybe you're a senior and you're in a calculus course and it's gone pass fail, and it would be easy to say, well, I just need to, you know, do what I need to do to pass the course. the mindset that you should have is, no, I actually need to learn what I can learn, because that's going to put me in a better position when I'm sitting in the classroom at college, whether that's Case Western Reserve or someplace else. So even though you may not have the external reward, of a grade, or we may not know what that means, internally, you're going to want to put yourself in a position where you're actually learning to the best of your ability, and the best that your resources allow, as much as you can right now.
Yeah, I don't hear any of you saying, oh, this semester doesn't matter. It's different. Crystal, I wonder how many times over the last month or so you've revisited your college counselor self and wondered.
I mean, acknowledging that this is really hard is so important. I mean, we can't imagine what the challenges that you all, that families, that your friends are facing. And the fact is that's really hard. And so my gut reaction is just getting through the day is a success. But also I think it's important to honor the work that you've already done, and to finish your senior, junior, sophomore, whatever year it is, strong. You've gotten this far, and I think that taking the time certainly to keep up with your grades, but I think it's a huge win when you can end the day and say, whew, made it through this one. And as a former college counselor, as someone who dealt with high schoolers every day, you all deal with so much, you juggle so much, you have so many worries, you have so many concerns, and so much is happening to you. And acknowledging that this is hard is something that I would definitely say out loud, so to speak.
And what about, to get really serious, the economic downturn that's winding out as a result of this pandemic? Rick, what do you think will be the way colleges will respond to this without, we don't even know really how it's going to flush out over the next few months, but just what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, that's a tough question. And there are a couple of things that I think about that are going on right now. One is economic uncertainty faced by colleges and universities right now. And I think all of us are looking back at kind of 2008. And, we've been through this experience before and drawing on those experiences. And like 2008, again, we don't know yet, and we don't know long-term where we're going to be. We're going to be working, with families who have been impacted in a very real way, either through a job loss or fewer hours or uncertainty or, retirement, plans that aren't what they were a couple of months ago. And again, I would say, this is really tough for families, but for financial aid offices and, our financial aid staff and the financial aid staff at every other college and university in the country, they work with families in this situation every single year. And it's not just first year families coming in, it's a student in their sophomore year or their junior year or the beginning of their senior year, and something has happened within the family that has changed the economic situation. And I think, all too often, the questions our financial aid staff get are focused on that first year. And you need to think about college as a 4-year experience, 5 if you do a co-op experience in there, but not because you couldn't get the courses in. And you need to think about kind of how this is financed as a 4-year experience as well. And, to ask financial aid offices about, well, our staff is dealing right now with a lot of families who are concerned, and it's the what ifs. I don't know what's going to happen. And I think, colleges and universities will have varying practices around this, but I think most of them, if the economic situation for their students changes long term, you reapply for financial aid at most institutions every year, in part because we recognize that financial circumstances change. And looking for an institution where you trust that kind of over that 4-year period, they're going to be there and they're going to work with you. I often joke this time of year that I'm motioning right beside me that I have this big sack of cash that, I could just hand out to people, whenever they call. We don't have that sack of cash, but, sometimes we can increase grants. Sometimes we can work with families to find other alternatives for how they could make this work. And having that conversation is an important thing to do.
So take some comfort in the fact that a financial aid staff has been through something like this. They know how to have these conversations. So it occurs to me it's the middle of April, and historically that would mean we're having our busiest days on campus. Admitted students are coming to visit. Students are getting in the cars and starting their college search and going around the country. And none of that's happening. Occurs to me that students may be worried about how, in the absence of the ability to visit campus, do I express my interest? There's a term in our business called demonstrated interest. How do I have the opportunity to show a college that I'm interested? College night at my high school isn't happening. Crystal, how would you respond to a student who's worried about that?
I would say don't, in a lot of ways, because no one is traveling anywhere. And so we understand that campus visits are off the table. But how you engage with a college and university right now is truly remarkable, because we've all gone virtual. We have virtual tours, we have webinars, we have these type of panel discussions. And so the way in which you're able to explore an institution is really unique for this time period. And so I would thinking about demonstrated interest in the traditional way is off the table. But certainly, as your college counselors are giving you colleges to look at, or your parents are giving you colleges to look at, doing things like this are going to just give you more information. And so the amount of information that's on your fingertips right now is really plentiful. And just do that right now and focus on this and what you can control at this moment, which is the virtual world, so to speak.
Good, thanks. Leanna, it appears that we have a few questions. Is that true?
Just a few.
Are there some themes that you could share?
So I think it would be helpful to just perhaps clarify what our policy is going to be with testing, and specifically the ACT and SAT, because there were a lot of questions about this in particular moving forward with us. So maybe that would be a question just of clarification for students, and specifically about the testing.
That's great. Bob, do you want to answer that?
Sure, happy to. So, we recognized pretty early on that the changes, the disruptions, the cancellations, the reschedulings of SAT and ACT administrations was just going to create a much bigger hurdle for families to be able to kind of make sure that this was part of the planning and part of the equation for getting ready going into their senior year. And kind of thinking about that, and also recognizing this is, kind of obviously the test optional conversation is something that many colleges and universities, many had already moved to a test optional kind of admissions world. Others had been engaged in the conversation to think about whether that would make sense and whether that was appropriate at their schools. And I would count us in that category. We've been studying this issue for a while and having some internal conversations about test optional. And so when we think about kind of what the role of standardized testing is, first we do value, and there are students who can utilize standardized testing to really be able to strengthen their applications. It's something that we think has merit, and does add some degree of predictability of success on our campus, and helps us understand something about a student's ability to kind of come in and really do well in our curriculum. At the same time, we read applications holistically. And so what that means, that's kind of a word that's used a lot, speaking of inside admissions speak. But what that ultimately means is that everything that we ask for in the application, every opportunity that students have to be able to share information about themselves, can play a role in how we understand their ability to be successful as a student and their ability to be a contributing member of our community. So when we think about that, we know, we have some schools we have a lot of history with. We may have really good information about what kind of courses are offered or how students tend to perform at different high schools. We have recommendation letters. And so moving beyond just the grade, and as Rick and Crystal touched on this earlier, what does that grade even mean in the spring of 2020? It might not mean the same thing that we thought it did, but a teacher can tell us a lot about how a student really engaged with their work, maintained their interest and their focus as much as they could on learning and how they approached learning. And so when you think about some of those different pieces, we think that we've got a good chunk of information to be able to understand and to be able to kind of make sense of the student. Sometimes standardized testing can be something that really helps us with that. But in other cases, we feel like there's good information. So ultimately, then it's a recognition that this disruption has put students in a place where if they're needing to make a decision about, should I spend this time at this moment focused on doing what I need to do for school and making sure that I've got that covered, or should I, given sort of trade-offs, should I spend that time preparing for an SAT or an ACT that I might be able to take in a few weeks? We thought the answer was pretty clear. Focus on your schoolwork, and take care of that.
Thanks. So I know this look. It looks like Rick wants to say something.
That's because I always look like I want to say something, Karen. This is actually, when we made the decision to move to test optional for the 2021 cycle, it was one of those moments where I was really proud to work in Case Western Reserve, because the answer was just yes. When they announced that the May, I think it was the May SAT and the April ACT were all being jumbled and canceled, and the March retake was being canceled. When I went to the president and the provost and said, gee, this is what I think we ought to do, their answer was absolutely. Students should focus on their education. And then these policies are usually on college campuses set by faculty, and at the kind of 3 layers of faculty governance that we went through, it was unanimous at every point. And I've had colleagues from other institutions reach out because we were the first national university to make this move. And I've had other colleagues reach out to me and say, well, but what about engineering? And I was able to say back to them, it was the engineering dean who emailed me immediately and said, great decision, this is what we ought to be doing. And the other thing that I think very much reflects the kind of place that we are, if we're in, we're all in. So there are no caveats on this. It's not, we're test optional unless you're an international student. We're test optional unless you want a merit scholarship. We're test optional unless you want to apply for the 8-year med or the 7-year dental program. It's, if we're going to do it, we're all in, period. All programs, all scholarships, everything. It was one of those moments where I was just like, I work at a really awesome institution with really amazing people.
Maximum flexibility and understanding. Leanna, what else are you hearing? I'm glad that question came up.
Yeah, so
somebody did a poll. Did
yeah,
you?
I did a poll.
So I was just going to say, there was a couple polls that we've thrown out there to everybody. So just wanted to let you guys know. So this poll talking about whether the test cancellations impacted your plans to take the SAT or ACT, 65% of you said yes. So you know, obviously that's impactful. I mean, that shows you how you know, it really has impacted a lot of us. And there's a lot of students asking about the AP and the IB credits, how those are going to be viewed by universities, whether we're going to still be giving credit for those. And I thought it was a really interesting question that someone asked. You know, I'm taking a class that's in this field, and suddenly the type of learning environment has changed significantly. You know, how is that going to impact how we're viewing students within those classes in that second portion? So kind of a two-part, a little bit question.
Great, thanks. Bob, would you like to handle this?
Sure, happy to. So I think, you know, the first part of the question, at least for us, you know, and is fairly easy. We haven't made any changes to our AP policies. So the kind of test scores required for credit and placement are the same. And, you know, as we were learning and kind of staying connected with our colleagues and our networks at the College Board and at International Baccalaureate, we felt very positive about the changes that were made out of necessity to AP exams and to kind of how IB results were being generated. As we worked with our colleagues here on campus, again, felt very good about that this is something that we could continue to sort of enact the same policy that we had before. So from the standpoint of thinking about, you know, should I, you know, if the test is different, should I still take the exam? We are encouraging students to go ahead and take it. You always have the opportunity. One, it gives you an experience sort of sitting for an exam that you've worked really hard for, that you worked most of the year to prepare for, and to be able to kind of have that opportunity to sort of see what comes of it. If you score a 5 on the exam, if it's an AP, for example, and that's a score that would earn you credit at many colleges or universities, you always have the decision later on to make about whether or not that's credit that you would want to take. But it gives you that chance to, again, kind of gain some experience taking an exam in that kind of a setting. And then to the question about, you know, if I'm in something now and it's directly related to what I want to study, and now the way that I'm learning and everything else has been impacted, how are colleges going to view that? You know, that's kind of less the question. The question really is more about what are you able to gain out of that experience? What are you able to learn from that course? And recognizing that there may be things that are harder to learn in this environment than it would have been in a normal situation. It's not something that again that we're going to hold against you, or that we're going to penalize you for, or that we're going to say, well, you know, you were taking chemistry, but you know that last half of your or that last quarter of your senior year, you had to take it remotely. We just don't think you know chemistry very well, because you're exactly in the same position as every other high school student in the country and beyond, who's been dealing with this. So really kind of being able to do what you can. I am so, and I don't say this just because my wife is a teacher. Teachers have worked, our faculty, my wife, your teachers, they are working extremely hard to try to create an opportunity for you to learn the material that they know is important. And, you know, it's not going to be perfect, but as much as you can be kind of engaged with that and you can be open to that, that's going to put you in a better position to actually have at least some of that material under your belt as you move on to onto the next step in your education.
Crystal, you look like you have something to share.
I did. I feel the need to put on my college counseling hat a little bit. A lot of students I can see, well, how will you know that? How will we as college admission officers know that you've had this disruption where this class is so much different than what you're used to, and that you may have struggled with that? There's a point in the application, or there's a part of the application where you're able to add that in the additional information, and I think that's so important as you start thinking about creating those applications, is limiting the amount of guesswork that admission officers have. And so you are able to put that out there for us to know.
Thank you. My favorite part of every webinar is when the cat shows up.
Karen, I want to add one thing to that, which is know that the common application and the coalition application are thinking of exactly the same question, and are thinking of how do they need to change their applications so that students can convey to us the things that we need to know about their experience. So we have all got your back on this.
Leanna, what else are people thinking about?
Yeah, so I thought one of our earlier polls that we put out there was about the pass-fail and how many students had in their schools had implemented it. So 71% of you said no, your school had not implemented a pass-fail grading system in the spring. 29 said yes, and so you can kind of see, at least for those who are here. But I thought it was interesting. There was a student who asked a question, and I've seen a lot of students kind of asking similar questions here about, you know, if your school, first of all, let's do a two-part again. Let's make it. One, if your school did go pass-fail and you were working really hard, and perhaps, you know, you may not have had as strong of a showing earlier on in your career, but you had worked really hard. You wanted to show us now that you've gotten it, right? You've grown, and suddenly you're now a pass-fail. You know, how do students now kind of show us that? And then I guess the second part question is, you know, for those students who are not pass-fail, you know, going through this, how are we reviewing the grades? You know, some students are saying, hey, I'm working really hard, or my A's not going to count as A's anymore. So that kind of two-parter. Good. Rick?
You know, and here I'm tempted to make a joke that people wouldn't find funny. It's, you know, like, oh, for every A, we'll just deduct 10 points or something like that. We won't, I promise you. I think the most important thing for students and parents to understand is, you know, you think about the 5 of us here, and you think about how many transcripts we have seen over the course of our years between us. How many different schools have we read applications from over the course of our career? I mean, we cover a lot of high schools, not just in the United States, but a lot of high schools around the world. And we're going to understand nuances that students and parents may not expect us to understand. For example, there are some schools that, you know, give a year-long cumulative grade. And all of a sudden, they've moved to pass-fail, and that first semester grade, which was never intended to be on the final transcript, is perhaps going to be out there as a grade. We understand what that represents. That represents a milestone along the way and may not represent where you ended up in that class. Particularly if it's a class in that kind of example that's very directly related to what it is that you're interested in studying in college, that might be a good opportunity to get a recommendation from that teacher who's going to talk to us about your growth. We, you know, not only do we read your essays, we read the recommendations. We care deeply about what teachers say about how you learn and about the journey that you've had in that course. You know, students who do well and continue to do well, that's good. If you're in a pass, no pass situation, passing is going to be better than not passing. Certainly. So we'd like to see all pass grades.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yes, passing is good. But again, there are things that you have control over and there are things that you don't have control over. And this is going to be true for everybody. And again, not just in high school, but on our campuses as well. And we're going to get that. And quite honestly, I can't tell you exactly what this is going to look like for us because we've never done this before either. What we can convey to you is kind of what our mindset is going to be and how we're going to be thinking about this. And that goes back to your first question to Bob about kind of maximum flexibility and understanding where students are coming from. I do think that it is fair to say that kind of fall semester, is going to be really important for a lot of applicants, and making sure that you put together, a fall set of courses that make sense, and making sure that you are performing at your best in the fall is going to be advantageous for students.
Back to the importance of keeping your focus on things at this time, even though it looks different. Yeah. What else do you have, Leanna?
So, I thought it would be useful because we do have the pre-professional scholars program, and there's a lot of students that are asking about that. Some students had plans to do shadowing over the summer, maybe just, focusing in on that particular program. Are we going to be similarly test optional for that program, and how are we going to, consider the other summer lack of opportunities for shadowing in that particular program? So that's a specific question, but I think there's a lot of questions about internships and other shadowing opportunities. So again, kind of bringing it back, and I know we've touched on this a lot, but useful to bring it back to the larger one as well.
Excellent. Bob, why don't you take this?
Absolutely. So let me kind of start with the specific, but then let me go out and broaden a little bit from there. So, this particular program, that's an 8-year medical program, and then we also have the 7-year dental program, as Rick mentioned earlier, provides students with admission both to the undergraduate and to the medical school or the dental school of dental medicine. And one of the things that is kind of critical or has historically been critical in evaluating candidates is that they know what they're getting into. They've had a chance to gain direct experience, not administering medicine, there are laws against that, but that they're able to actually be around physicians or be around dentists, to be able to know that what it is that they're saying they want to do at the age of 17 or 18 or whatever it might be, is something that they're really committed to. They've had a chance to see not only the glamour that you see show up in something like Grey's Anatomy, but also like that sometimes being a healthcare professional, it comes with some really challenging things. And I think certainly we can all appreciate in the current environment what that might mean. So the way that I would think about this is, again, it comes back to, of course, you're not going to be able to be out volunteering in the hospitals or shadowing a physician or any of those kinds of things. And neither is anybody else right now. It's just not something that's possible. That doesn't mean that you don't have opportunities to do your own homework, to do some research about what it's like to be a healthcare professional. Maybe there's a chance, maybe you have somebody in your community who isn't, by the way, at this very moment, completely strapped, doing everything that they can to keep people alive. But maybe at a little bit quieter moment, there'd be a chance to kind of have a conversation, maybe through a technology like this, to be able to learn a little bit more about what it's like to be a physician. All of these things are about kind of helping students make well-informed choices and then helping them to kind of communicate that through their application. But I also want to say that, this was probably, well, actually it was earlier in the week, one of our mission counselors was doing a kind of fun little exercise, and they were asking us to kind of share what our sort of activities resume was when we were in high school. So we were kind of like sharing, okay, did you play a sport? Did you do whatever? And we were sort of filling it out as if we were filling out the application for admission. And the idea is that this will all be anonymized, and then we have to figure out who was who later on. So kind of going through that exercise, you know, I was reminded of the things that were so important to me when I was in high school, and that were so meaningful to me when I was in high school. And not just what it was like to play a spring sport, or to be in the spring musical, or to look forward to a conference or an event that we had worked all year for, but how the experience of doing those things really shaped how I think about things, shaped how I work and interact with other people. And what I know and what I feel and how I mourn for you as students is that that for so many students, those things that are so important to you have been pulled away. And so we recognize that missing that is not about missing something on your application. It's about missing something that it could be a really formative experience for you. And so the lens that I'm looking at sort of spring of 2020 through is, what are some of those things that you've been able to find to help form who you are and how you think about things? And it's not going to look exactly the same as it looked in fall of 2019 or fall of 2018 or fall of a long time ago when I was in high school, right? And so know that that's who's on the other side of evaluating the experiences that you've had. It's people like the ones that are on this panel tonight, and as we kind of have friends and colleagues across the country, you know, we know that they're thinking about this in the same way, that they're human and that they understand, you know, kind of what that human experience is for you. And they're going to kind of look at you through a little bit different lens than they looked before.
Thank you. Thank you. I know we're coming up on an hour, maybe one or two more questions, Leanna, if there are certain themes that are still, or this really, really important question that you're raising.
Given the fact that I had my cat show up, you know, the poll that's in progress right now, and I thought it was great. Someone asked a question whether this kind of camaraderie exists on our campus that you see between the panelists. Maybe that's a nice, that might be an easy answer to answer. But I know that, you know, I guess a good place to maybe wrap things up is a question from a student that asked, you know, what advice would you give me, and I'm speaking from the student's perspective here, of how to not be stressed during the year and this application process. You know, what kind of advice can you give me? And before we go into that, or maybe at the end, I'll give you the poll. Why don't we go with the question of that, and then I'll show the results of the poll after that.
It's a great question, and I'd love to hear everyone answer it. Crystal, do you want to start?
Yeah, my piece of advice is just to be you. You have this great story to share, and you have these great experiences that have made you. And I think that I work with students, and I've read applications where students forget that, and they get caught up in the creating an application where they are writing what they think we want to read. And so my biggest piece of advice is just be you in the best way that you can.
Excellent. Rick?
You know, I mentioned, I think at the beginning, I'm the parent of a high school senior. So for the parents in the audience, I'm almost at the end of experiencing this. My son has picked a college, is planning on doing a gap year experience that we're very happy about. And this year has been one of those moments. I've spent 30 years giving people advice on the college search process. And, you know, I've always wondered, when that time comes, will I follow my own advice, or will I become the crazy parent and therefore create a lot of stress for my son? And I think the most important thing for us as we went through this process, I'd really say there were two things. One, we were absolutely determined that this process would not take over his high school experience, that the actual experience of high school, the classes that he took, the activities that he was involved in, the friends that he had, those in and of themselves were really important things, whether they related to college or not. And he didn't make every decision that he made going through high school based around, but is this going to get me into college? What we also knew, and I will admit that, you know, with a college counselor in the house and vice president for enrollment in the house, you know, we probably know more than most families as we approach this. But the reality was, you know, we knew he was going to go to a great college, you know, and we knew that there were lots of great colleges out there, and there wasn't just one great college for him. And so kind of throughout the process, we knew he's going to be fine. You know, he's going to be fine, and it's not worth getting all worked up. You know, and we all see this in students that we work with, and parents that we work with throughout the year, you know, more anxiety than there really should be around the process. And, you know, yes, I should probably say, you know, there's, you know, lots of great colleges out there, but only one Case Western Reserve. But the reality is, whether, you know, it's Case Western Reserve or any number of other really, really terrific places, and really terrific places that many people may not have even heard about at this stage of the process if you're a sophomore or a junior. Be open. It's an incredible time to explore and think about, what do I want my future to be? You know, and be a little dreamy about it.
Yep. Good. Great. Bob?
You know, I think one of the things about this experience is that, you know, when you think about kind of coming into the world, you make sense of where you are by this constellation that's around you. And that constellation, those stars, are your family. It's sort of the organization of how you make sense of where you fit in the universe, and who your parents or siblings or other people that are close to you in your life are. And you know, one of the things that I've really kind of taken from this thus far is, normally this time of year, how much are you guys seeing me? Not very much. And I can say that my family would tell you the same thing, because this time of year, what I'm doing is I'm out visiting high schools. I'm doing college nights. I'm on campus, having welcoming people to campus and connecting with families. And I'm not seeing a lot of my own family. But you know, today I took a little break from my work to play a couple of rousing games of Spot It with my 4-year-old. She crushed me. And so I think, you know, for you students to be able to kind of take a minute to think about, who are the people in your life that are always going to be there for you, that have your back. And this is a chance for you to spend a little bit of extra time with them, and for them to help them see who you are and who you're becoming, and for them to help remind you where you come from, and who your family is. And what a gift. So many times we don't have the chance to do that. And the work that we do seems to demand that students are spending all of their time almost away from their families. But now you have a chance to spend time with your family, and hopefully, you know, as much as it might be hard, and you might have some tense moments, this is a gift, and it's a chance to really kind of reconnect and really feel the strength of those bonds.
What a gift indeed. I've heard so many people talk about the gift that being able to have more dinners together and cook together, and, you know, all these great meals. And so I'm back on the food meditation thing that I thought was wonderful. And so I have a quick little poll of the 4 of you of my own before Leanna shares the results of the most recent question. What's the best meal you've had in this time?
All right, I'll start. So we decided to do, typically around, my family celebrates Easter, and we would do an Easter brunch with friends who have similar age kids. And obviously that was off the table. And so I decided that I needed to elevate my breakfast game And so I made eggs Benedict, and then, but what I was really proud of is chicken and waffles, and then waffles with fresh fruit and berries and fresh whipped cream. And that was our sort of like morning breakfast. And it was knocked it out of the park. So I'd never made fried chicken and waffles before, but feeling like it won't be the last time.
As someone said to me recently, Uber Eats will be at your house in half an hour to pick up my order. It's great. Leanna, what's your best meal?
I had a great meal that my daughters actually together made for me, which is surprising that they were actually able to, functionally work together to make a meal. And it was a HelloFresh, because we do HelloFresh. So, so that was great, but they made the meal for me. And I think it was less about the food that I was eating, and it was more about the fact that they made the meal together and we got to enjoy it together as a family.
That's nice. Rick, what about you?
So a couple of weeks ago, I made for dinner garlic mashed potatoes, caramelized onions. And if you've ever done caramelized sweet onions, it takes like half of a 10-pound bag to caramelize the onions, and a couple of hours to do that with some grilled asparagus and some seared ahi tuna. And it was really good.
Sounds outstanding. And Crystal, don't disappoint. You're down in Memphis. What are you eating?
So one of the things that has been the hardest part about me being in Memphis is that I have not gotten a chance to see all my friends and enjoy all the things that I love to do in Memphis. But on Saturday, one of the local bars had crawfish. And so Patrick and I went and we got a couple dozen styrofoam potatoes of crawfish, sat out on the back porch, had a couple beverages, and just really enjoyed it. It was 70 something degrees. And so it was really nice to be in a t-shirt and pair of shorts, doing something that, typically this time of year down here in the South we do. So that would be one of my favorite meals that I've had so far.
That's nice. And just so everyone knows, Crystal is fond of, in meetings, kind of rubbing it in on the weather. Not loving that. Leanna, can you share the results of the last poll?
I can. And also, I think someone asked what my cat's name was. My cat's name is Blue. But you're more interested in the poll results. Did you watch The Tiger King? Yes, of course I did, 23%. Absolutely not, 39%. And lastly, on my list, 39%. I'm actually a little surprised by these results, I have to say, but interesting. This is why we do polls.
This is why we do polls? Listen, everyone, thank you for your time this evening. And to my colleagues, thank you for your candor and for having your hearts in the right place and making it so clear to students and families that we really do have their best interests at heart. We're looking out for you as you go through this process always, but particularly now. So many people's lives have been turned upside down, but going to college remains a really important milestone in people's lives. And we're here to walk that journey with you and to celebrate with you. So best of luck, stay in touch, and take care.